The night was darker than usual, a storm gathering somewhere beyond the horizon, the kind of night when secrets slipped out and mistakes found their stage. At 2:17 a.m., headlights cut across the empty street as a taxi screeched to the curb outside a small-town diner. The door swung open, and out stumbled a woman in a glittering dress. Heels clicking, mascara, smudged dignity shattered. She leaned against the lamppost, fumbling with her phone, her voice slurred with anger and despair. "Of course, leave me there just like that." "Fine, I don't need you," she shouted into the night before throwing the phone down, her breath clouding in the chill. No one noticed her except for the man inside the diner finishing his shift as the last customer left. His name was Ethan Cole, a single dad, barely holding life together with 2 jobs and a heart that refused to quit. But when he saw her stumble, he froze. This woman wasn't just drunk. She looked broken. "Are you enjoying our stories? Where are you watching from? Please like and subscribe to this channel so we can grow together." Ethan stepped outside, tugging his worn denim jacket tighter around him. His hands were rough, calloused from work at the auto shop earlier that day. He had no business getting involved. People like her dressed in expensive silk diamond earrings, catching the flicker of neon light, belonged to a world far from his own. But then she whispered something so faint. It cut through the night like a blade. "I don't want to go home." And suddenly, Ethan couldn't just walk past. Life had not been kind to him. His wife Lily had passed away 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their 7-year-old daughter Mia on his own. The house was small. The bills were heavy, and sometimes the cupboards felt too empty for comfort. He lived paycheck to paycheck, fixing cars by day, working at the diner by night, never allowing himself to dream bigger than survival. Still, Mia was his light. Her laughter filled the silence Lily had left behind. Ethan worked for her, lived for her, breathed for her, but he never expected her. The woman now clinging to the lamppost to stumble into his night. Her name was Clara Vance, CEO of one of the largest tech firms in the city. To the world, she was untouchable, polished, ruthless, a woman who had clawed her way into boardrooms ruled by men twice her age. She was on magazine covers, in headlines quoted for her brilliance and envied for her beauty. But tonight she was just another lost soul mascara streaking down trembling cheeks. Ethan took a step closer. "Hey, you okay? Do you need help getting somewhere safe?" Clara's laugh was bitter hollow. "Safe? Nowhere's safe. Not even my own life." Her legs buckled, and instinct made Ethan reach out, catching her before she hit the ground. He smelled the perfume mixed with whiskey, the sharp edges of a life lived too fast. "You can't stay here," he said quietly. "Come on, I'll get you somewhere warm." Ethan never invited strangers into his world, especially not women who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. But something about her made it impossible to leave her behind. So against his better judgment, he led her to his old pickup truck parked by the curb. The seat was torn. The heater wheezed like an old man, but it was safer than the cold street. She leaned back, eyes heavy. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you need it," he said simply. She studied him, trying to focus. "You don't even know who I am," he shrugged. "Don't need to. You're just someone who shouldn't be out here alone." As the truck rumbled to life, Clara's head tilted, her voice a fragile whisper before sleep claimed her. "You don't know what I've lost tonight, and you don't know what it'll cost you to take me home." Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. He didn't understand her words then, but he soon would, because by morning the world he thought he knew, his quiet, struggling, ordinary life, would no longer exist. The old truck rattled along the quiet road, its headlights cutting narrow beams through the night. Clara sat slumped against the passenger door, her breath, slow eyes heavy with the weight of alcohol and something deeper, disappointment that went far beyond a single bad night. Ethan kept glancing at her, his jaw tight. He didn't know who she was. Not really. To him, she was just a stranger who looked like she'd fallen from a world he would never belong to. When he pulled up outside his modest house, a weathered little home with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox, he hesitated. He never brought anyone here. It was Mia's safe space. Their bubble against a world that could be too harsh. But leaving Clara in that state wasn't an option either. He killed the engine, turned to her gently. "Hey, we're here." Her eyelids fluttered, and for the first time her gaze truly focused on him. She looked at the truck at the house, then back at him, her expression unreadable. This is your place." "It's not much," Ethan admitted, a little embarrassed. "But it's safe." Clara gave a faint smile that was almost mocking, almost sad. "Safe? That's rare." When she tried to push the door open, her legs betrayed her. Ethan caught her again, guiding her up the small porch steps, his arms steady against her trembling body. Inside the house smelled faintly of coffee and lavender. Mia's doing. Her drawings were taped across the fridge, her school books stacked neatly on the table. It was humble lived in, and filled with warmth money couldn't buy. Clara's gaze drifted to a picture frame on the wall. Ethan smiling faintly, holding a little girl with wide brown eyes and pigtails. The sight made something twist in her chest. "Your daughter?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Mia, she's asleep upstairs. Try to keep quiet." For a woman used to penthouses and glass walls overlooking skylines, the small house should have felt suffocating, but strangely it didn't. The quiet creaks of the floorboards, the mismatched couch cushions, even the chipped coffee mug Ethan handed her. All of it felt human, in a way her luxury apartments never did. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again, staring into the mug. "Because you need it," Ethan said, simply lowering himself onto the armchair across from her. "You don't know who I am," he shrugged. "Don't need to. Right now you're just someone who shouldn't be left alone." Clara's lips curved into a tired smile, but her eyes betrayed something else. "If you knew who I was, you might not be so kind." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't want to play games. He'd learned life was already cruel enough without secrets and masks. By the time she drifted off on the couch, the storm outside had broken rain, tapping softly against the windows. Ethan watched her for a moment, then draped a blanket over her before heading upstairs to check on Mia. He had no idea the stranger in his living room would change everything. The next morning, the sound of rain had faded into the smell of frying eggs. Mia's laughter rang through the house as she sat at the kitchen table, swinging her little legs while Ethan cooked. She was mid-sentence when Clara appeared in the doorway. Her hair messy eyeliner smudged, but her posture still regaled despite her hangover. Mia froze fork halfway to her mouth. "Daddy, who's that?" Ethan glanced back, awkwardly scratching his neck. She's a guest. Needed somewhere safe last night." Clara leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and for a moment her sharp SEO gaze returned. But then her eyes softened at the sight of Mia, who stared at her with the blunt curiosity only children carried. "Hi," Clara said, her voice softer than Ethan expected. Mia tilted her head. "Are you a princess?" Clara blinked. For the first time in years, she laughed. A real laugh, not one meant for cameras or boardrooms, something like that. Ethan watched the exchange uneasy. He didn't want Mia tangled up in whatever world this woman came from, but the bond sparked instantly undeniable. Over breakfast, Clara said little, but Ethan caught her watching Mia with an intensity that unsettled him. It was almost envy, almost longing. When Mia skipped off to get her school bag, Clara set her cup down, her fingers tracing the rim. "You're a good father," she said quietly. Ethan gave a modest shrug. "I try." "No," she insisted, her eyes suddenly fierce. "You are. Do you know how rare that is to see a man give everything, and not just for himself?" Her words hung heavy, and Ethan realized there was more beneath her broken exterior than he'd guessed. He leaned forward slightly. "Who are you really?" Clara's lips parted, and for a moment the mask slipped. "I'm someone who has everything money can buy, and nothing money can't." The way she said it made Ethan's chest tighten, but before he could press further, her phone buzzed violently on the table. She snatched it up and her entire demeanor changed. Her shoulders straightened, her tone sharpened. Yes. Tell the board I'll handle it myself. No, I don't care what the shareholders think. I said I'll fix it. Ethan froze. He didn't understand much about high-powered business talk, but the authority in her voice was undeniable. When she hung up, silence stretched between them. You're not just anyone, he said finally. Clara smirked faintly. No, I'm not. And in that moment, the fragile bridge between their two worlds began to form. One made of curiosity, mistrust, and an undeniable pull neither of them could explain. But Ethan also sensed something dangerous because a woman like Clara Vance didn't just stumble into a life like his without consequences. She didn't know yet how much she would need him, and he didn't know yet how much it would cost him to let her in. The days after that night blurred into something Ethan hadn't expected. He thought Clara would vanish by morning, swept back into whatever high-rise world she belonged to. But she didn't. Instead, she returned. Started with small things. A sleek black car would pull up near the diner and she'd step out sunglasses, shielding her eyes, heels clicking against the pavement. She always looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Yet somehow she ended up in his orbit at the counter of his diner shift at the garage, where he changed oil even at the small park where Mia played after school. At first, Ethan thought it was coincidence, but Clara Vance wasn't the kind of woman who lived in coincidences. One evening after closing the diner, he found her sitting on the hood of his old truck, arms crossed, staring at the fading sunset. You keep showing up, he said, cautiously dropping his apron into the passenger seat. Her lips quirked. And you keep letting me. I don't have a choice, do I? You always have a choice. He sighed, leaning against the truck beside her. So why here? Don't you have penthouses, restaurants, chauffeurs? Clara tilted her head back, watching the sky shift from orange to violet. I have all of that, and none of it feels real. Not like this. Ethan studied her, trying to reconcile the sharp-edged the world worshipped with the woman sitting barefoot on his rusty old truck. It didn't make sense. And yet the more time she spent in his world, the more natural it seemed. One Saturday, Clara showed up unannounced at Ethan's house. Mia was on the floor coloring, and Ethan nearly dropped the dish he was holding when Clara crouched beside his daughter, asking, "What are you drawing?" "A castle," Mia said proudly. "Daddy says maybe one day we'll see a real one." Clara's expression softened and she glanced at Ethan. "He's right. And maybe one day you will," Mia beamed. To her, Clara really did look like a princess with her flawless hair and commanding presence. But to Ethan, the sight was unsettling. He didn't want Mia to dream of a world so far removed from their own. Still, there was no denying the way Clara's laughter filled the living room that afternoon. The way Mia leaned against her as though she'd known her forever. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway watching them torn between discomfort and something else, something dangerously close to longing. Later, when Mia had gone upstairs, Clara lingered on the couch, her heels discarded legs curled beneath her like any other guest. "You let people in too easily," she said suddenly, her gaze fixed on him. Ethan raised a brow. "Funny, I was thinking the same about you." Her lips curved, but her eyes darkened. "No, I don't let people in. I let them think I do. That's the difference." The silence between them grew heavier. Ethan wanted to ask what she meant, what scars she carried that made her so guarded. But he didn't, because he knew what it meant to have questions you weren't ready to answer. As weeks passed, their moments multiplied, stolen pieces of two lives that should never have intersected. One evening, Clara dragged Ethan and Mia into the city, insisting they join her at a bookstore she adored. The staff nearly tripped over themselves when they saw her whispering behind shelves, their eyes flicking nervously to Ethan in his worn flannel and boots. Clara ignored them all. She crouched beside Mia in the children's section, pointing out fairy tales while Ethan pretended not to notice the stares. "You don't belong here," a man muttered behind him, loud enough for Ethan to hear. Ethan stiffened, his fists clenching. But before he could react, Clara appeared at his side, her eyes cold as steel. "He belongs wherever I am," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice the room into silence. Ethan didn't know whether to feel grateful or uncomfortable. Maybe both. One night on the roof of his house, Ethan found her staring at the stars. She traded her heels for one of Mia's borrowed blankets, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You ever wonder," she whispered, "what it'd be like if money didn't matter? If none of it did all the time," Ethan admitted, sitting beside her. "But wishing doesn't pay bills." Clara turned to him, her face illuminated by moonlight. "That's the thing. I have more money than I could ever spend. And still I can't buy what you have." He frowned. "And what's that?" She looked at him for a long moment, her voice trembling when she spoke. "Home." The word hit him harder than he expected. And in that fragile second, the space between their worlds felt smaller than ever. But reality never stayed silent for long, because while Ethan's days were filled with oil stains, bills and school runs, Clara's were still tangled in boardrooms, shareholders, and endless pressure. The more time she spent in his small world, the more eyes noticed. Whispers started about why the untouchable CEO was disappearing to some unknown corner of town, about the man who seemed to keep reappearing at her side. And though Ethan tried to ignore it, he could feel it too. That tension, that widening gap, reminding him that her world and his could never truly blend. Still, when Clara looked at him across the roof that night, her eyes soft, her voice quiet, he couldn't deny the truth forming inside him. He was falling for her, and he wasn't sure if he had the strength to stop. It happened on a night Ethan would never forget. Clara had invited him to a company gala not because he belonged there, but because she wanted him there. She had insisted, her eyes shining with a rare kind of vulnerability when she asked. Against his better judgment, Ethan agreed. He borrowed a suit that barely fit, combed his hair back, and tried not to notice how out of place he looked, standing beside her in the glittering ballroom. Crystal chandeliers lit up the space. Champagne glasses clink-tocked and conversations hummed like electricity. Everyone there wore money on their sleeves, and everyone noticed the man who clearly didn't belong. At first, Clara stayed close, her hand brushing his as if to anchor him. But as the night unfolded, shareholders, journalists, and partners pulled her away. Ethan found himself standing alone near the bar, clutching a glass of water while eyes flicked toward him, then away, followed by muffled laughter. He tried to ignore it until he heard it. A sharp whisper just behind him. "Look at him. She picked that. A mechanic with grease under his nails. What's she playing at charity?" The words hit like a punch. Ethan's chest tightened, shame burning hotter than anger. He glanced down at his hands, rough and scarred, and for the first time, he felt small, smaller than he had in years. When he turned, he caught sight of Clara across the room, laughing lightly at something a man in a tailored suit had said. She looked every inch the powerful CEO, again untouchable and perfect, a world away from the woman who had sat barefoot on his truck. The doubt sank deep. Maybe he was just a distraction to her, a temporary rebellion against her polished life. He couldn't breathe. He set his glass down and started toward the exit, his footsteps heavy. Clara spotted him just as he reached the doors. "Ethan, wait!" she called, weaving through the crowd. But before he could reach him, someone caught her arm. Another executive tugging her back into conversation. Ethan didn't stop. He couldn't. The night air hit him like a slap as he stepped outside, loosening the suffocating tie. He leaned against the cool stone wall, fighting the urge to disappear completely. He had let himself believe just for a moment that he belonged in her world, but tonight had reminded him brutally of the truth. And yet as he turned to leave, Clara burst through the doors, breathless eyes, wide with something he couldn't quite name. "Ethan," she said, reaching for him, but he shook his head, pain raw in his voice. "You don't need me in there. You never did." Her hand froze midair. Her lips parted, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked truly powerless. The days after the gala stretched into silence. Ethan didn't answer Clara's calls. He didn't open her messages. Every time her name lit up his phone, he felt that same sharp sting he'd felt at the bar. Her laughter mixing with the sneers of men in suits who had looked at him like dirt. He told himself he was done, that whatever fragile thread tied him to her world had snapped. And yet when Mia asked, "Daddy, where's Clara?" Ethan had no answer. He only forced a smile and changed the subject. Life returned to its rhythm. He poured himself back into work, his hands black with grease at the shop, his shirt damp with sweat at the diner. He fixed brakes, changed tires, cleared tables, mopped floors, living the life he knew, the life he trusted. But something was different. For the first time in years, he found himself restless. The humiliation at the gala didn't just wound him. It ignited something inside him, a voice that whispered, "Maybe you don't have to stay here forever." One night after tucking Mia into bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of unpaid bills. Normally, that sight filled him with quiet despair. But tonight he felt something else resolve. He grabbed a notepad and began sketching old blueprints, diagrams, numbers, ideas he'd buried after Lily's death. He used to dream of opening his own garage, a place where he could do more than survive, where he could build something lasting for Mia. But dreams had felt like luxuries he couldn't afford. Now, after Clara, he realized something. Maybe surviving wasn't enough. He worked late into the night, the pencil moving furiously. He could almost hear Lily's voice in the back of his mind. "Don't give up on yourself, Ethan." By morning, he was exhausted, but alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Clara was unraveling in her own way. For the first time, meetings felt hollow. Boardrooms felt suffocating. The victory she had once tasted in controlling every room now tasted bitter. Because Ethan's absence was louder than any applause. She had tried to reach him, even driven by his house, only to see the curtains drawn tight. He didn't want her there. And for Clara Vance, a woman used to bending the world to her will. That rejection cut deeper than she'd ever admit, but she refused to give up. Weeks later, Ethan stood outside a rundown warehouse at the edge of town, Mia clutching his hand. The building was abandoned, but as he looked at it, he saw something different. A beginning. "This is it, kiddo," he told Mia, his voice steady. "One day, this will be ours. A real shop. A place where we build something better." Mia grinned, her eyes sparkling with belief he barely had in himself. "Can Clara come see it too?" Ethan hesitated, swallowing hard. Maybe someday. That someday came sooner than he expected. The very next evening, Clara appeared at the diner. She didn't come in heels or diamonds. This time she came in jeans and a plain blouse, her hair tied back, her makeup barely there. She looked more human than Ethan had ever seen her. "Ethan!" she said softly, standing by the counter. He froze, every part of him screaming to stay guarded. "Clara, you shouldn't be here." "I had to be." Her voice trembled. "I need you to understand. That night, it wasn't about them. It wasn't about me laughing with anyone else. It was just habit. A mask I've worn for so long I forget to take it off." Ethan shook his head. "Doesn't matter. That's your world. And this is mine. I can't be your charity project." Her eyes burned. "You think that's what you are, Ethan? You're the only thing in my life that hasn't felt like a transaction." For a moment, silence swallowed them. Then Ethan said quietly, "If you mean that, prove it. Not with money, not with power. Prove it with something real." Clara's chest rose and fell. "I will," she whispered. The next week, Ethan returned to the warehouse to find something he hadn't expected. The place had been cleaned, the trash cleared windows, fixed a new lock on the door, and inside tools basic second-hand, but tools nonetheless lined against one wall. Ethan froze, his throat tightening. On the workbench sat a note in neat handwriting. "Not charity, a start for you." See, he sat heavily on the stool, staring at the tools. Part of him wanted to be angry. Another reminder that her resources dwarfed his, but another part, the deeper part, knew this wasn't money talking. It was effort. It was her stepping into his world, not dragging him into hers. And for the first time since the gala, Ethan let himself believe that maybe she wasn't just passing through, but hope is fragile. because just as he began to let her back in, a shadow was already forming, one that would test everything they had built and force them to decide if their fragile bond could survive the weight of two very different worlds colliding. The warehouse buzzed with life months later. The sound of drills, the scent of fresh paint, the laughter of a little girl running between toolboxes. It was no longer abandoned. It was becoming his. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, watching Mia chase a paper airplane across the floor. For the first time in years, he felt pride humming in his chest. Not just survival progress. He had taken the humiliation, the doubt, the pain of the gala, and turned it into fuel. And through it all, Clara hadn't disappeared. She hadn't tried to buy him mansions or whisk him away to boardrooms. Instead, she came in overalls, sanding wood, sweeping floors, bringing Mia snacks. She stood beside him, not above him. One evening, as the sun bled orange through the warehouse windows, Ethan found her leaning against a beam, her arms crossed, watching him with a smile. "You've done it," she said softly. No, he thought. "We've done it," but he only shrugged. "Still a long way to go." She stepped closer. "Ethan, I need to tell you something. That night at the gala, I saw you walking away, and for the first time, I was terrified. Not of losing face, not of losing a contract, of losing you." Her voice trembled, the words stripped of their usual armor. "I don't need another business partner. I don't need another investor. I just need someone who sees me, the real me. And that's you." Ethan's throat tightened. He remembered the whispers, the humiliation, the way he'd felt small beside her world. But looking at her now, in dusty jeans with paint on her wrist, he realized something. She had chosen this, chosen him. Not for status, not for escape, but because against all odds, she wanted a home as much as he did. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You could have had anyone, Clara, but you chose the guy with grease under his nails." She smiled through tears. "No, I chose the man with a heart bigger than anyone I've ever met." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Heavy, beautiful, complete. Then Ethan closed the distance, his hand brushing her cheek, and kissed her. Not the desperate kiss of two worlds colliding, but the quiet, certain kiss of two people finally choosing the same future. Mia's giggle broke the moment. "You, Daddy?" They both laughed, pulling back their foreheads, resting together as sunlight bathed them in gold. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight of the world lift. Clara Vance wasn't the CEO tonight. He wasn't the mechanic. They weren't the billionaire and the single dad. They were just two people who had been lost, who had found each other, and who chose together to finally come